It sounds like, from what you've said, you don't believe this case was even designed to go forward.
No.
They're not planning on a courtroom showdown here.
No. And there's no way. By the way, I engaged with Libby Locke and Tom Clare a long time ago about defamation.
I just went through this whole transcript, and honestly, it's a masterclass in how to take real issues and twist them into something completely unrecognizable. And I think we need to talk about it because this stuff is everywhere now.
And they told me not to go after it because the bar was so high. And I had a very clear case where someone told a blatant lie about me, which we happily countered right away.
You've dealt with them before.
Yeah. Oh, I have emails from, this is the funny part, I have emails from them. I love you, adore you, watch your show.
They're totally soulless, both of them.
Yeah, clearly.
Yes.
The motive here is money, which is fine if that's what you want your legacy to be, because at the core of this case, which most people should be speaking about, is their defense here is I am admitting, which they've never done before. They've now admitting that Emmanuel Macron was only 14 when they met, when he was in that play. 15, she says, whenever this affair happened. And in my suit, they admit that Emmanuel Macron's parents took him away from the school because of this relationship. Do you understand how the audacity of, I'm a creep, I macked on a student at best, and I have the audacity to file this lawsuit? I mean, what is going on in France that you would so willfully put that in a lawsuit, which, by the way, debunks their earlier claims. When he was first running, the press said he was 17. Then when Xavier Poussard proved that that wasn't true, then suddenly we're saying he was 16. Now we've got them writing that he was 15. But the truth is that Emmanuel Macron was 14, and they can't go back on that truth because she has...
Isn't that child molestation?
There we go. That's another big thing happening here. She's desperate now to keep it at 15. Brigitte wants to keep it at 15. No, he was 14 when he was in that play that she says that she watched him in. As you know, 14-year-old boys, I guess as a 40-year-old woman, you would just be so swept away by a 14-year-old child on stage. He was in this play. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a French name, Mila Kundera's play. And that's when she alleges that she saw him and he just was ahead of his time, a savant, so brilliant in his demonstration, his ability to act.
He's a little kid.
He's a child. He's a child, and this is a very creepy, sadistic story. And the more that you learn how much the press lied about that earlier story, I mean, even the press in the beginning, when he was running, even said that Brigitte Macron was this like irresistibly hot teacher. Like they kept comparing her to Claudia Schiffer. And then when Xavier and these journalists got documents and like, pictorial evidence of what Brigitte looked like at that time, she looked like a man in the middle of a transition, and so even that, I mean, the way the press lied to sell this creepy relationship is something that should concern everyone, whether you believe she's a man or not. What you have is a couple that is willfully getting away with, at best, like molestation, sexual perversion,
he runs
deviance, and he runs the country.
This is not some random guy.
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
And that's not in dispute.
No, that's not. It was in dispute because they tried to at first say that he was 17. Now she's saying 15. The truth is Emmanuel Macron was 14.
I'll just go with 15 and say that's wrong.
Yeah, right? Do we even need to...
15. I mean, that's a whole different thing.
And that was the comments under Jake Tapper's interview with Tom Clare. People, and this is the left, this is his show, were outraged. They were going, how could you defend this? I asked the question to Tom Clare on my show as I unpacked all of the child molestation that surrounds them. It's an entire orbit of people who have been found guilty and have openly admitted to molesting their children. These are their friends, okay? That's why she's angry, because I'm like, it's not just them. It's this guy, this guy, this guy. He funded the campaign, then had to come out and say, yes, I molested my stepson, and the stepdaughter wrote a book about it. A person admitted to that. And
so here's what really bugs me about this whole thing. The person talking keeps changing Macron's age when he met his wife. First they say he was 17, then 16, then 15, and now suddenly he's 14. Look, the actual documented timeline shows he was 15 when he met Brigitte at the school where she taught. She was 39. Is that weird and inappropriate? Absolutely. Should we be uncomfortable with teacher-student power dynamics? Of course we should. But here's the thing. The real story isn't dramatic enough for these people. They have to keep making it worse, more criminal, more shocking. Because that's how you get clicks, views, and donations in today's media landscape. And that should tell you something right there. If you have to keep exaggerating the facts to make your point, maybe your point isn't as strong as you think it
They're
is.
friends of the Macrons?
Oh yeah, their current lawyer, okay, who was the finance minister. Brigitte handpicked him to be the finance minister of France. His name is Eric Dupond-Moretti. This was my episode 2 days ago. Of course, because everyone in their orbit just, I don't know, has an interesting pedophilia story.
Do you have any friends who are pedophiles?
None. They just can't stop finding friends that are somehow involved in these crazy pedophilia scandals. And Eric Dupond-Moretti made a name for himself as the lawyer that comes in on behalf of the offending. In this case, it's almost always incest, by the way, in all the cases that he involves himself in. And he convinces the court, as he did in one certain case called the Manouche affair, that, okay, yeah, it is incest. Yeah, he's been raping his daughter, but, and this is what he's famous for, it's happy incest. And he sold to a court and got this guy sentence reduced. He had been raping 2 of his daughters.
Come on.
I'm not kidding. You could look this up on Wikipedia, no less. And he sold this to the court, coined the phrase along with another person who, another lawyer who Emmanuel awarded the Medal of Freedom to. And they said to the court in Amiens, which is where Brigitte and Emmanuel are both born, that you should release this guy because he loves his daughter. And now she's 21. And so it doesn't really matter. And honestly, it's the mom's fault. They encouraged them to all sleep together. And so they did. They released him early. And then his daughter tried to escape him and he killed her. So this is who everyone, this is the guy who's on the news channels right now saying, we're going to go after Candace Owens because this is a state affair. And he's got this whole glorious story about how I'm being funded by Russia. Because it's always Russia, as we all know. It's got to be Russia.
Funded by Russia?
His theory was
This
so...
feels like the kind of end stage of something.
Yep.
I hate the phrase global elite because it sounds so spooky or whatever, but that's what it is.
The depraved. I don't even call them the elite. They're the depraved. And they've just been running the game for so long that they're not even getting creative anymore.
But there's always a part of town with depraved people. Like there, every society has the depraved community. But has there been since Rome really a whole class of depraved people with this much power? That's what gets
I think
me.
so. Yeah, the more that I study and the more that I take a look at this picture, because at first, you go through this period where you're going, am I crazy or are they all defending like children being raped? Like this can't be right. Like somebody's going to stand up and say something. And the only thing that you can do in those moments where you're questioning whether or not this could be the circumstance is to educate yourself further.
Yes.
And I find that whatever area they have sort of, an inordinate response to, where they're like getting very angry about something that seems so simple, is probably where you should press your thumb the hardest. And I did this with like Sigmund Freud. I kind of said something on my show about how like Sigmund Freud was like a pervert and getting into children and incest, his whole theory, blaming the children for their parents being incestuous, and the reaction across the press, like, how dare she? I'm like, he's dead. Why are you defending this guy?
Not American.
He did present a theory that these children who were being raped by, by their fathers were actually attracted to them. Why are you defending this? And then I got educated about it and started reading books and stunned. Like, yes, this is actually something that he was doing. And I learned this from the person who controlled the Sigmund Freud archives, who wrote this amazing book called The Assault on Truth. But there is this common thread that it brings you back to Paris every time, whether you're talking about Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, talking about Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte, you're talking about Sigmund Freud. He studied and then came up with this theory while he was studying under Charcot in Paris, that actually, even though we see all this evidence that these kids are being raped, it is their fault because they're attracted to their fathers. And for this guy who rang the alarm on this, like years later, he was working with Anna Freud and he was in control of the archives. His name is Jeffrey Masson. He got kicked out of the archives for telling the truth.
Very, very famous case.
Oh yeah, he got kicked out. But he wrote the book still because he still had the letters. He published the letters to prove that Sigmund Freud knew for a fact these kids were being raped. And
boy, was he attacked for that too.
But here's what's interesting about that. He publishes that book, The Assault on Truth, and Anna allowed him to, because she could have stopped the book, and Anna Freud chose not to stop the book. I think she wanted the secret to be out. But you go through these stories, and over again, you get this theme of this very dark theme of children that are being raped, right? And it's incestuous. Like I said, while they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, like, why do we keep coming back to this theme? And why does it seem that the media is colluding to cover that up? Like, I thought no matter where we were on the spectrum, left or right, like when it came to children, whether it's murder, rape, like we all were on the same page that like we have to defend innocent lives. And so then you have to press further and go, what is the theology here? Because everything, as my husband has taught me, is a theology. They're being guided by a theology. And while the rest of the world is being driven towards either being agnostic or being outwardly atheistic. I think the people that are in control are being pulled by.
Oh, they're not atheists.
They're not atheists at all.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. One of my smarter children said to me today, actually, said child molestation is the only crime with no justification. And I had never thought of it that way. And it's like murder, of course, murder's wrong. Of course, there's plenty of circumstances where I can imagine committing murder and going to hell for it. But I mean, I can imagine, getting so mad that I shoot somebody or, you know what I mean? Stealing, lying. But it's not possible to imagine a justification for molesting a child, for being sexual with a child. And it's also not possible to imagine.
Okay. So they're basically saying Sigmund Freud was some kind of child abuse cover-up artist. And man, this is where you really see how conspiracy theories work. Freud initially thought mental illness came from repressed memories of abuse, but then changed his mind and developed theories about unconscious desires and fantasy instead. This is just normal academic evolution. Scholars change their minds when they get new information. That's how knowledge works. But watch what happens in the transcript. They take this completely normal intellectual development and turn it into Freud knew kids were being abused, but decided to blame the victims instead. That's not what happened. That's taking a complex historical development and cramming it into a villain narrative. And why would you do that? Well, if you can paint the founder of modern psychology as corrupt, then you can dismiss any psychological analysis that might contradict your theories. Pretty convenient, right?
For all the sins that I can imagine committing in a certain circumstance, like that's just, I can't even get my head around it. That's just not appealing in any way. Like you'd never even think of wanting to do that. So it's got to be spiritual.
It is spiritual for them. And that's why studying Sigmund Freud, and I realized why they were so triggered when I'm always a person like accidentally lands on something. And then there's just like this reaction.
Yeah.
And like, you can't do that. And then I go, okay, well, I better learn about that because there's something you don't want me to know. And so now I'm curious. If they would just leave me alone, I promised I wouldn't even have come down this path. But what you learn about Sigmund Freud is that what he actually mainstreamed, I mean, the psychoanalytic movement was quite literally a movement to mainstream gaslighting. And this is no question. Like I said, you can read Sigmund Freud's archives. This guy was not a guy theorizing that this is what was going on. He had access, learned German, read the archives, alerted Anna Freud and was like, hey, did you know your dad knew that these kids were being raped and yet he lied to the public? And she's like, yeah, I think, please maybe don't publish that. But then she let him publish it. And I think that was a cry for help, but that's my theory. Anyways, the second book to read was once you get to that and you go, what is this guiding theology? Why did Sigmund Freud at first acknowledge, as he did, openly that all of these kids were being raped because he was at the morgue. Some of these kids were dying because of their injuries. And he was at the morgue in Paris. He saw this up front. There was no dispute. The literature has been published. He's studying under Charcot. And then he does this pivot suddenly when he turns 35. And he says, never mind, these kids are not being abused. They're attracted to their fathers.
They're the sexual provocateurs. David
Bacon published a book and he relates it to, and he makes a very sound argument and then proves his theory that it's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish mystical tradition. And he relates it to the Kabbalah, this sort of Gnostic idea that you have to descend into hell and then you'll be brought up. And like the worst thing that you could possibly do, the worst sin, they believe in this idea of holy sin, is to harm a child. Now, again, these people that I'm citing, just because I know that you start talking about Sigmund Freud and anti-Semitism, these people who wrote these books are both Jewish. Jeffrey Masson is Jewish. He's an Ashkenazi Jew. David Bacon is an Ashkenazi Jew. These people are professors and, they have the credentials here to make these conclusions. And what he theorizes in this book is that Sigmund Freud was mainstreaming the Kabbalah through psychoanalytics. And the reason why he waited until he was 35, as he explains, is that in the Kabbalah tradition, they think it's so powerful, whatever the Kabbalah is. And I'm not educated on the Kabbalah, I will admit that. But whatever it is, they don't tell their kids about it until they turn 35. And when Sigmund Freud was 35, he received a Hebrew Bible from his father. And it's like, I guess they believe in numerology, whatever it is. And he was suddenly awakened to whatever aspect of the Kabbalah that it was. After David Bacon published the book, a rabbi came to him. He got in touch with the rabbi and spoke to this rabbi who told him that, yes, Sigmund Freud was a Kabbalist because he knew him personally, and he had a Zohar in his apartment or in his place, and he then verified that his theory, as reading through his papers, was correct, and that he was a Kabbalist. And so I think it's important for people, as I started a book club, to read these books. Like, don't take it from me. And I always say, yeah, we need to stop falling for this credentialism. You shouldn't listen to me because I'm Candace Owens and I have a podcast. I want you to read these same books and to recognize that something very wrong is happening in this world. And when we point to these facts, we're all being gaslit. Like, we're suddenly being told that having a response, as just one example to right now, to like kids dying in Gaza makes us monsters. Well, Sigmund Freud is the person that introduced the idea of sort of this, that gaslighting could be an effective strategy.
And gaslighting, as I understand it, is the process of inverting blame. Mm-hmm. So I punch you in the face and attack you for assaulting me. Mm-hmm. Like, how dare you hit me?
Right.
So,
and it feels like we're constantly being gaslit.
Well, it does feel like there's an awful lot of blame shift.
And then we get to the part where they start connecting Jewish mysticism and prominent Jewish thinkers to systematic child abuse. And I'm sorry, but alarm bells should be going off in your head right about now. This isn't new. Connecting Jewish religious practices to harming children is literally one of the oldest anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in the book. It's caused pogroms, massacres, and genocide throughout history. The speaker tries to cover themselves by saying, "Hey, these authors I'm citing are Jewish too." But that's exactly how these theories always work. They find Jewish voices that can be twisted to support anti-Semitic narratives. When someone starts drawing lines between Kabbalah, Jewish intellectuals, and child abuse conspiracies, they're not uncovering hidden truths. They're recycling some of humanity's most dangerous lies.
I see it in a very different context, but it's on economics. It's like, you know, the working class of the United States has been like completely under assault. It's not accidental. They were kind of targeted for extinction and treated with maximum contempt. And then they're like blamed for their medieval attitudes. They're all racist or whatever. It's like, no, actually, I think they're the ones who aren't winning. They seem to be losing out in a deal that is making a lot of other people rich. Why are we attacking them?
Well, then you get called a racist, right? You get called a racist for noticing that. And these people who are like, I just want to be able to feed my families and go to work and feel good about that.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with race. Like, how did race become part of this? It's like, what?
But that's an element of that. And one of the things to recognize about Freud is that, so the Freud family creates a psychoanalytic movement, Sigmund Freud does, and they're gaslighting people. But then that turns into modern propaganda because it's the Freud Bernays family. It's the same family. Edward Bernays is the person that created propaganda during World War II, the OSS. Like, they were using him to figure out how can we mainstream, like how can we convince an entire population to want to go to war, you know, to hate Germans. This is the guy that they brought in. So it's the same, the psychoanalytic movement then turns into propaganda with Edward Bernays and then turns into PR. Like, the biggest PR person in the world right now is still the Freud family. The Freud family are the PR for the royals. His name is Matthew Freud. So you can draw a direct line in understanding that
I think Matthew Freud was married to Rupert Murdoch's daughter.
That is true. That is correct. Mm-hmm. And so it's very interesting to
just noting.
Yeah, and it's important for people to recognize this, though. These people have had a tremendous head start. Okay. They know how the mind works. They have run these experiments on people. They have had this relationship with the state forever. In fact, I think they are the state, if I'm being honest. They are the state. I shouldn't even say it's a relationship with the state. And what they are constantly trying to do is to infect your mind. Okay. So picture you being that, you know, child who lived this horrific experience. And now you have an adult sitting before you and saying that never happened and you're crazy. And what's wrong with you is that you're like attracted to your dad. That's what they're doing to all of us in a certain way. Obviously way more devastating when it happens to a child in that regard, in that sinister regard. But when you see the mainstream media apparatus today and they're gaslighting us, like the case of Brigitte Macron is the most gaslighting I've ever seen in my life, where it's just like, you could debunk this in 1 second, but you won't. And you're calling us deranged and you're calling us crazy and you're calling us anti-Semitic for caring about a dead Palestinian kid. And it's like, this is, yeah, they created this system. And the only way that we're going to be able to defeat it is we have to first understand it. And that's why I really encourage people to get educated. And I just made it my point, because I constantly kept getting this claim, like it's anti-Semitic, talk about Sigmund Freud, that I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm only going to read Israeli historians and I'm only going to read Jewish books that are written by Jewish authors, so that we can just go ahead and dispel the rumor.
I've never heard that. It's interesting. Sigmund Freud has gone in and out of style. Well, he was very in style when I was young, and then
Same for me. He was very in style.
Yes, and then he was really knocked off the pedestal by feminists, as I recall, because he had like some non-fashionable views on women and calling them hysterical, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't recall Sigmund Freud being like a protected figure. Since when is criticizing him a hate crime?
That's what was so weird to me. I did one episode on the Daily
I don't
Wire.
think he was a religious guy, at least.
Exactly. I did one episode and I was speaking about also all of his friends. His best friend was this guy, Wilhelm Fliess, who his son came out, Robert Fliess, and said, my father sexually assaulted me. Everyone surrounding him was like sexually assaulting their children in Vienna, which is
again, what is that? I mean, I feel like I've been everywhere, know a ton of people. I've never met anyone who's been accused of molesting his own child. That is so far out. I've known people who've done every bad thing, and I've never met anybody who's even been accused of that.
Yeah.
And yet you're describing two clusters of people, powerful people, famous people, where like tons of people in the orbit have been accused of or have in fact committed child molestation.
Well, let me just tell you, as you get into my series, like as I point to all this orbit around them of everyone who just keeps accidentally committing pedophilia, defending pedophilia, whatever it is. The best part is for me that they kind of laugh in your face. Like they want you to know that there's an element of it that's partially sadistic. Presidential portrait. Emmanuel Macron leaning against a desk. Everybody has to do this, leaning against a desk, obviously, the official presidential portrait.
Yes.
He chooses to put a book, and he has in multiple interviews said that it's his favorite author, by Andre Gide on the table. Andre Gide is an author who admitted openly that he was a pedophile. He's a pederast. He specifically only actually molests little boys. And he would go down to Algeria, Morocco, and he would write books based on his experiences. The president of France chose to put that book, an Andre Gide book on his desk for his official presidential portrait. Like there was no other book that you could have picked to put there. There's an element of it where I think that they've amassed so much power. And it's quite interesting because I think maybe Daryl Cooper told you about this, but getting into Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr,
yes,
who wrote that weird book.
Yes.
The space, it's called Space Relations by Donald Barr, where he predicts a colony of Khazars, as he calls them, Khazars, Kossars, he spells it, that are so bored with their power. They're so bored with being elite, just getting away with everything, And he then predicts kind of in this fantasy book, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's very strange. Got it. And he also was, in the OSS, which was the precursor for the CIA. But there's an element of that when I see Emmanuel Macron engaging in that it's like they want to get caught and they just have so much power that they know that there's never going to be any consequences for it, where you go, why would you do this? You could have put any other book on your desk. You could have put literally any other book on your desk, but you chose a self-admitted, never denied the fact that he would go down to Morocco and he was into little boys.
And then we get to the part where they start connecting Jewish mysticism and prominent Jewish thinkers to systematic child abuse. And I'm sorry, but alarm bells should be going off in your head right about now. This isn't new. Connecting Jewish religious practices to harming children is literally one of the oldest anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in the book. It's caused pogroms, massacres, and genocide throughout history. The speaker tries to cover themselves by saying, hey, these authors I'm citing are Jewish too. But that's exactly how these theories always work. They find Jewish voices that can be twisted to support anti-Semitic narratives. When someone starts drawing lines between Kabbalah, Jewish intellectuals, and child abuse conspiracies, they're not uncovering hidden truths. They're recycling some of humanity's most dangerous lies. Look, I'm not naive. There are real problems with abuse of power. There are real issues with how institutions protect predators. And there are absolutely legitimate questions about how the wealthy and powerful escape accountability. But this isn't that. This is someone taking those real concerns and using them to build a fantasy where everything connects to everything else, where every powerful person is part of some grand conspiracy, and where only they have the special knowledge to see through it all. And the really insidious part? They're using child protection as emotional blackmail. If you don't believe our increasingly wild theories, you must not care about children. That's manipulation, not investigation. Real child protection requires real evidence. Real journalism requires verification. Real accountability requires distinguishing between legitimate criticism and paranoid fantasy. The moment we stop demanding actual proof, the moment we let our emotions override our critical thinking, we become easy targets for exactly the kind of manipulation we think we're fighting against. So yeah, stay angry about real injustices. Stay vigilant about real abuse. But for the love of all that's holy, demand better evidence than, "This guy wrote a book that sort of supports my theory if you squint at it the right way." Because once we abandon the idea that facts matter, we're all screwed.